Today, we're going to talk about why you might want to record in RAW on the Sony FX30 or FX3. Let's go. What's up, everybody? Phil with Photo Gear Fun here today. I wanted to dive into why you might want to shoot RAW on your Sony FX3 or FX30. I got my FX30 about a week or so ago. I've primarily been a photographer and I'm looking to get into video. Found out some interesting things about this camera just in the testing that I've done, but one of the things that I found is that it can shoot RAW. It will shoot RAW externally, not internally. So in order to be able to shoot RAW, you'll need a device like the Ninja 5 or V, or Ninja 5 or V Plus. And I've had mine for probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 years, and it's mostly been collecting dust because I don't really use it as a monitor per se, but this will allow you to export 4.7K RAW to this Ninja V. So you will need this external device or a similar external device. I think this might be the only one in the market that will allow you to be able to record RAW. And if you have an older version like I do, an older version of firmware, just update it. And Atomos is always adding support for cameras for RAW shooting. And the FX30, the FX3 is also supported, is on that. I just wanted to show you why you might want to shoot RAW and some of the pros and cons. So one of the pros is you have greater control over all of your settings. Some might say it's just for white balance and adjusting white balance, but from a video perspective, I wanted to show you some of the advantages of recording in RAW. So I took some video and I recorded both in RAW and in the Sony internal compression. I just wanted to show you some of the differences here. We're in Final Cut Pro 10, and this is kind of the normal screen that you would see. And if you click on your information tab, normally you'll go to basic and you'll see some information about the camera and the video. But with RAW, if you head into the settings, you'll see that there are some extra settings here, like RAW to log conversion, camera LUT, ISO, which actually you can control your ISO speed, and then your color temperature, and you can actually change the temperature. So as you change these settings, it's as if you're changing these settings in the camera. So one of the big advantages to shooting RAW is the fact that you'll be able to control your ISO. So let's say I shot this at the base ISO of 800, and there's another at 2500. But if this were not exposed to my liking, I could raise or lower that ISO and affect the image. Also, you're able to, choose this RAW conversion. So if you don't want anything done, or if you want to change it to, I'm just using the Sony LUTs here, so I can do a Sony LUT, and then I can choose a camera LUT, which would be the same. And then basically my color grading, or at least my basic color grading, is done. You'll also see the resolution here. It's 4640 by 2610. So this is 4.7K. And then when you import it into your project, you can downsample. So as we go through this is just, again, I shot the same video here, and this is from the Sony codec, and you can see the size of this one, and you don't see all the different options that you have with the RAW. So you still can choose a camera LUT. You can name the camera if you'd like, but if you switch back and forth on the settings, you can see that you have much more control, again, specifically over your ISO and white balance, and a little bit more control over the LUT. Also, one thing, it comes in as an HDR. So technically, I think all RAW video is HDR. And if you're on Final Cut, you'll get a pop-up that says, this is HDR content. And you can actually apply an HDR effect to it, but this is just standard. So the biggest advantage, again, is looking at the ability to be able to change your ISO and change some of the settings that you wouldn't normally be able to change, like color. And you can also do an exposure offset up to 1 stop plus or minus. So this is like exposure compensation. It's actually done after the fact. This video was shot, at base ISO of 800. And if we apply the same LUT to this particular clip, it really looks very similar. I don't know if there's a huge difference in quality between RAW and using the Sony codecs, but maybe there's a slight difference. One of the disadvantages is that you won't have any of the in-camera settings. So if you have noise reduction if it's high ISO, or you're using lens profiles, anything like that that's in the camera normally in the codec, if you're recording with a regular Sony codec, you won't have, because you're recording RAW. You also can't use active steady shot. You can use standard, or you can turn it off. And one of the things that I did was kind of to show you the difference between active or standard. I think I shot this in standard steady shot, but I wanted to show you one of the advantages of being able to use the Sony codecs is you'll get data to be able to use Catalyst Browse, which is software that allows you to be able to stabilize after the fact. So whether you have it on active or off, you can actually change the stabilization. So what I'm going to show you here is a clip that I shot. Same clip. On the left is the non-stabilizer. Actually, this is standard steady shot, and on the right is catalyst browse. So it does take a little bit of time to render this, to correct it. And I've got a 90% crop here in catalyst browse, but you can see on the left, pretty, well, fairly shaky footage, and on the right, almost gimbal-like. So these clips were all shot handheld. So to me, using catalyst browse quite often, that's a huge disadvantage because you won't be able to use catalyst browse because you won't have the data on the RAW file. So there's no data whatsoever as far as the catalyst browse goes. So that's a huge disadvantage. Again, I don't think there's a huge quality difference. The file size is much larger. Also, one of the pros about editing the video is ProRes is that it's not compressed, or it's less compressed than the Sony. So on this M1 Mac, you might not see a huge difference, but if you're using an older PC, this footage, the raw footage, is much easier to edit. Now, obviously, you have to carry around a monitor with you. There's the weight of the monitor, there's the weight of the battery, dealing with an HDMI cable, so it's definitely not as convenient. So really, the choice you kind of have to weigh out is, first of all, do you want to pay the money for this device? And then second of all, do you really want to carry all this around and try to manage that just for, more control over the way it looks? And for some people, the answer is definitely going to be yes, and for others, it's going to be no. If you're just shooting a casual vlog, maybe not. I just wanted to show you some of the differences between shooting RAW and then shooting using the Sony codecs. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you like this type of video, please consider subscribing, and I will talk at you again in the next one.